All right, gentlemen, let's get into the most fun part of the Super Bowl and what everyone is talking about, all social media, everyone in America. Shit, you could be overseas and you know about the officiating that has been going on in the NFL. I have not seen a sport that has been more looked at for officiating than the NFL, probably in the last 2 seasons. But what is your guys' thoughts on, especially last week in the Bills Chiefs games on this officiating?
I think it's becoming apparent that, and you brought up a good point, the last few seasons especially, but it's becoming apparent that reffing is being talked about more than ever. And you're going to have bad officiating in every sport. Like it's something that's always going to be debated upon. In baseball, you have, bad balls and strikes calls. You have bad foul calls in basketball. But it just feels like the past few seasons, and with how much people are talking about it more and more, that it's becoming a really big problem in the NFL, especially when you have these big calls in the Bills and Chiefs game where everyone except for Chiefs fans saw and could pretty easily understand that Josh Allen got across the line. And even the play before, Dalton Kincaid got across the line as well. It looked like, at least. And if he didn't, Josh Allen sure did. So, I mean, that's just one of them. And then you have the other call where the catch that apparently was made near the end of the first half, and that hit the ground. I mean, it hit the ground. Everyone could see it hit the ground before he had full control. They were both on the ball, and it hit the ground pretty clearly. So it's just these calls that don't help the fact that the past few years we've seen some very, seemingly lopsided refereeing for the Chiefs, and it's just something where, a lot of people are talking about it, but for a good reason. It just seems like whenever there's a close call like that, it's always going their way. It's always going the way of a certain team that seems to get all these favorable calls. And it really is starting to become a problem. I don't know what you think, JD.
It's becoming a big deal, and more people are starting to realize it. And I think we've all really learned that over these past couple of weeks, because this Super Bowl, I don't know, just leading up to it has just felt kind of weird. Like, it doesn't feel like usually that week of Super Bowl week, like you're just souped up, like you're like watching it. You're just like watching all these different shows and all these things. And I don't know, for some reason this time it's not the same. And I seem like I'm hearing more about the refs, and to bring that around also as being in the content side of things, as actually we are now more. We did, as far as videos, we actually did two, and actually like one was on each of those plays. And between our YouTube reels and then our TikTok videos, those two videos did over 1.5 million views. So that just shows you, I mean, and comments just out the ass. Like our TikTok and everything was like blowing. Like we could not keep track of it. People were just talking about it so much.
It's just arguing.
Yes, just like arguing about it nonstop. So yeah, I mean, just to go ahead and kind of get into it, we can just do the first one, and that was that catch. I mean, as far as the whole like tie ball thing goes, I mean, like they got that part right. I mean, that like to me is like very clear. They like both technically like had like hands on the ball, but the tie is actually going to go to actually that's the Chiefs player there. But to me, the ball clearly hit the ground. The ref did come out and he explained some type of way that the ball can hit the ground and all this stuff. And by what he said, I mean, yes, it was a catch, but by everything I've always known, that was actually not a catch.
I mean, shit, you look at it the same way when you ask someone in politics a question and they just go around it and say some random shit. I mean, everyone's looking at it like, are you seeing what the fuck I'm saying? Like, his hand's sitting on top of the ball and everyone's arguing, what didn't move? No fucking shit, it didn't move.
Yeah.
His hand was on top trapping it.
Yeah, about to say it was trapped.
Like, I don't know how in the world you think that's a catch.
I do have to say on that certain play, I don't think that was not a game-changing play because there was a flag thrown.
Yeah.
So, like, the Chiefs were actually going to have a first down. So, I'll actually let you go into the next one because I don't really think that one was specifically that like a big game changing play.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, not egregious by any means, but I mean, from putting them on the what was it, like the 5-yard line compared to the 15, I mean, you still have to score, but odds are they're probably going to get another penalty somehow. But yeah, I mean, Ben, like you talked about that first down call. I mean, what's triggering to me watching this game is you have the line judge on the far side of the field who has a look at the ball like coming a yard over, and then the other side judge coming in a yard short. And somehow, if you're looking at the back of Josh Allen, you have the majority and can say he's a yard short, but you don't even measure it or anything.
Nope.
And then, like, clearly when they showed the other angle, I think they showed it once from the other side. And Tony Romo's like, oh, yeah, that's obviously a first down. I mean, you could see it, but, like, what the fuck?
Yeah. I don't know. So, I mean, I actually don't know the protocol for which side judge gets majority in that situation. I guess it's the one closer to the play, like yardage wise. And that's why the back line judge got it, since they were a little bit closer, but clearly did not have the better angle of the ball. Like you said, back turned. And if the ball is blocked by his body, I don't see how you can make an accurate call. And that's the other thing people are talking about with these line judges, and and they're usually older too. It's like, it's a thing where football is one of the only games that's still played with those 10-yard chains and absolutely no help for the ball by any sort of recording. I mean, in tennis, they literally now have a machine that can tell you exactly where the ball hit, and you can challenge it, and it's like that. It literally takes 2 seconds.
Same
They're
thing
like,
in
"Nope, it was
soccer
in,
too
it was
with
out."
fucking VAR. I mean, they can detect like a shoelace.
In soccer, they can get this little tiny part of your cleat to see if you were offsides. All these sports are integrating new things, and whether it's good or bad, but at least some people say you need the human element of the game, but at least in that situation, you're making the correct call and you're using technology that exists. And the NFL is still using their technology from decades ago, that is just the technology of the human eye. And I think we're seeing that that's not working out very well. You're relying on these guys, and half the time, when it's like a quarterback sneak or something, how can you tell me you know exactly where that ball went? Like, there's no way you know. But there's so many ways they can implement technology. A chip in the ball, they could use an eye in the sky, like anything. You're telling me that Amazon, they can track all these stats on exact player routes and yardages, like down to percentages of how much a ball is going to be complete, but they can't track where the ball is on the field perfectly to tell if these are first downs or not. I don't know why we're not using technology in some sort of sense. Even baseball has talked about at least starting to have the conversation about the challenge rule with the umpiring, with the automatic strike zone. It hasn't been implemented yet, but they're using it in other leagues, and they're at least having the conversations about it. We've heard nothing about that from the NFL, and I don't know if we ever will, at least in the near future. And it's just a shame to see, because we're going to keep having these calls where it's like, oh, what happened, where you can clearly see it, and somehow it's not getting called. So I'm just wondering the day when we might start to see something like that. But
I mean, what's crazy to me is that, like, yes, I mean, we were talking, like, before we got on the show, like, you were saying, I know you're a huge Vikings fan, how they were the number one, like, got the most penalties favorable to them. Well, you can argue that, and Chiefs fans will come in and say, well, we don't get that many penalties. Well, I swear, if you look at, like, game-tying drives, game-winning drives, like, how often penalties are just thrown their way. I mean, we were talking earlier how on that last play of the game, when Kincaid is wide open on that 4th down, someone threw some yellow laundry on the field, because Tony Romo up in the box was like, oh, we have a flag on the field. And it even showed up on the broadcast and everything. And then magically when Kincaid drops the ball, it's gone.
And the really fishy part about that is, and I don't know how many times I've seen this, but when they throw a flag and then they pick it up, I think it's actually protocol, and they're supposed to say what the flag was for.
Yeah.
And then they say there is no penalty for blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
They every time I've seen them throw a flag and then pick it up, the head ref comes out and he says, there is no penalty for intentional grounding. There's no penalty for this, because they still announce what it was thrown for. And then after they talk about it, they end up picking it up and they don't use it, but we still hear what it was for. And then usually if there's a replay and they're like, oh, okay, so this is why it wasn't a flag.
Yeah.
None of that. It's just they picked it up. We didn't hear anything. And then no replay like of what the flag should have been for. It was just kind of funny to see that. That was fishy to me because you always hear at least what the flag was thrown for.
So, I've just never seen a team get so many penalties. I mean, when you even look at it, like people are scared to hit Mahomes when he's running because they think they're going to get a penalty. Like he has free reign over the middle of the field because the one rule that also needs to be looked at and implemented, like how late can a quarterback slide?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well, and college has a good rule about that, at least for a certain sense of that, because it doesn't get everything for the out of bounds and stuff, but you can't fake slide in college. It's actually, you'll just be counted down from where you start. So you can't fake a slide or anything like that. They'll just count you down. Not a rule in the NFL yet, and we've seen Mahomes use it before. And granted, Mahomes is an expert at, tweaking the rules, and that's to his credit. That's not his fault that he's taking advantage of it. It's up to the NFL to then be like, okay, this is super unfair, because if you're going to protect the quarterback, as they've made a point, that's fine. But then you have to make rules to where the defensive player, like, it's almost impossible for a defense to be like, you have to guess whether he's going to fake slide or not, because he's used that multiple times now this year. Faking going out of bounds, faking sliding. And again, that's nothing against Mahomes. It's not in the rule book, so he can take advantage of that. And he should, if it's not going to be a rule. But then that's up to the NFL to say, okay, we need to change some stuff, change how we do things, because you have these guys that you've protected so much now that can fake these plays because they know the defender can't touch them or else it's a penalty. And then they're taking advantage of it and getting huge plays out of it. So, I mean, credit to Mahomes for using the rule book to his advantage, because he does it more than anyone. And he's an expert at things like that. Like, he's one of the best. He is the best quarterback in the NFL. But I just would love to see a rule change like that so that they can't do that anymore, because it's no fun to watch. You don't want to watch a guy get a big play by faking a slide or something. Like, that's no fun for anyone, except Chiefs fans.
Yeah, and you know what, Ben, you actually said actually something great, and I just have to go actually back to it here. As far as baseball goes, you actually talk about them like starting to use like all that tech now, and they like are as far as actually like minor league teams, they've already started doing it. Yep. And to me, like, like I'm a big baseball guy, and I'm one of the ones that says that should not be a thing there. To me, there's so much that like goes into that to where the catcher sets up to what kind of pitches are thrown in certain spots. Like, I just am not one that thinks that should be a thing. But like you said, they actually are looking at that and actually looking to move forward with that, though. And to me, that's a lot different than even like football. Football to me is a little bit more clear cut. Like, oh yeah, like actually did the ball, like, like actually like first down play. I mean, that to me, that's just so much more clear cut. And the NFL is such a big league. I mean, like, just actually, like, as far as money goes, there's so much money within that league that you would think that they would want to do everything they could to get everything right.
Well, even looking at like a ball and a strike, like, I don't think it's hard to compare the two, because like so many things have to go right in baseball for that call to kind of make as big of a difference. Make it mean something. Yeah, like, because you have like the whole count situation going on with baseball. I mean, that's like what I would compare it to is like a ball being thrown a foot outside the strike zone into the other's batter's box and being like, "Oh fuck, strike!"
Right.
Like, it just pisses me off.
Anyway, yeah. Like, where I was going with that was just with actually like football, you would think that they would be doing something, but that's not something that they've even talked about. So yeah, like I actually don't think that we see anything like that anytime soon.
It's probably because Roger Goodell's clown ass is probably on both of his knees for Andy Reid's shriveled cock.
Well, and something that has to be at least considered when talking about this kind of stuff too is the big elephant in the room: gambling. I mean, FanDuel, DraftKings, I mean, half the commercials you see on TV now during sports games are either Kevin Hart and LeBron James in their living room doing a DraftKings commercial, or a FanDuel commercial. And even during broadcasts now, they've started doing the same game parlays from people. It's all over ESPN when they're breaking down games.
Yep.
They've started doing the plays and stuff. And with this being implemented, it's almost, is it a coincidence or not that the NFL has chosen to ignore these issues and almost not talk about them to the point where it's like taboo to even bring up officiating? And then you got to think, okay, well, they're taking these huge gambling deals and have the power to just like absolutely change a game with all these bad calls. And is it a coincidence that it feels like when I was a kid, I mean, granted, I was a kid, so I didn't know as much as I do now or follow it as heavily, but it just didn't seem like there were as many egregious calls that were actually changing games. There were bad calls. There's always been bad calls in sports, but this many and this lopsided towards certain teams, like it's not just the Chiefs. There's other teams in the NFL too, but it just seems like there's times where there's such egregiously bad calls more often now. And it doesn't seem like a coincidence that the last few years is when this very public gambling started really picking up and all these deals started happening with teams. And you got to think it almost seems too coincidental to not be a coincidence, or to be a coincidence that the reffing is being affected at least some sort there. And I don't know whether it's as high up as Roger Goodell. I would highly doubt that, because that would be something that would be investigated. But even lower down, we've seen already in the past 2 years multiple NBA confirmed betting scandals. Yeah, I mean, like with the Jonte Porter stuff, and then
we just had Terry. It's Terry Rozier, right?
And then we had Jonte Porter just in the last 2 years. One very recently, and they were confirmed. So it's like, when's the time we're going to start seeing some NFL ones? Like, I know there's been a few kind of talked about ones, but not quite as heavily as the very, very confirmed, very obvious NBA ones. And it's going to start happening. I'm telling you, there's at least at some level something happening with that in the NFL. I don't think it's as high as Roger Goodell literally calling up refs being like, all right, let's rig this game for the Chiefs. But to a certain sense, something's probably going on.
I mean, Taylor Swift being worth $1 billion, you don't think she's placing any bets? Like,
I don't really peg Taylor as a big betting person, but who knows? She might just be
she reacts like she has money on this shit. And
she might be a super big degenerate placing like $2 million bets.
Oh my God. But guys, switching gears a little bit, let's go into the Super Bowl and some of the zebras that are on the field this week, because we got an interesting crew that's lined up for these refs. Ben, I know you have the list of officials refs that are on the game.
Yeah, so the Super Bowl referees, it'll be Ron Torbert, and he's like the main ref. And then, you umpire Mike Morton, down judge Max Causey, line judge Mark Stewart, field judge Merle Robinson, back judge Jonah Monroe, replay official Kevin Brown. Ron Torbert's the main guy. And
just a second, did I hear you say Bill Cosby is reffing?
No, I think it's Max Causey.
Oh, I thought I heard Bill Cosby.
That would make the game actually really entertaining. They should just have random people ref. We might be better off with him reffing it.
I mean, shit, yeah. These people are 60-year-old. Like, this is like my grandpa that needs cataract surgery and both eyes on like the side judge from 40 yards away. Oh yeah, first down.
Yeah. It does seem kind of funny, and it's because they have the most experience, which I get, but you're telling me there's not other guys that are at least like mid-30s, 40s that haven't been reffing for 20 plus years? Because I know a lot of people, I mean, they start out small, high school games and stuff like that, maybe even lower level. And I get that they work their way up like their whole life. Like, that makes sense to me. So why they're older. But you're telling me you can't find some mid-30s guys, a few 40s that have been reffing for 20 plus years and know the game well? Like, I don't believe that. All these guys are like upper 50s, super old, and, credit to them. They're very experienced. But it just seems like we could get some better eyes or some more, something.
I mean, actually, yeah. I mean, actually, to that point, he's actually only been an actual head ref since actually 2014. So I mean, like, it's not even like can actually paired to other guys. He's actually not even. I mean, he hasn't been doing it for that like crazy like long.
Yeah.
But
And to that point, since he's only been doing it since 2014, he has a record for both of these teams. He's only done 8 Eagles games. The Eagles are 5-3 with Ron Torbert as the referee, including, though, even though he's only done 8, 2 of them came this season. And the Eagles are 2-0 this season with Ron Torbert as the referee. On the Chiefs side, he's only done 4 Chiefs games, and Kansas City is 3-1 in games with him as the head ref. However, one of those 4 games was the AFC Championship against the Bengals 2 years ago, when the Bengals had that late roughing the passer call because they pushed Mahomes out of bounds, and it set up that game-winning field goal. That was a very, very close game. Mahomes was driving in a 20-20 tied game. They were driving down to try and get the field goal, got a lot of extra yardage from the roughing the passer penalty, which basically sealed the game because that put them in field goal range. Now it's Mahomes. We can sit up here and complain about refs all we want, and probably for a good reason. He probably still would have made some Mahomes play and gotten in field goal range anyway, just because of how good he is and his track record. He's still the best NFL quarterback. But still, very close, controversial call with Ron Torbert as the ref, and that was the last game that he's done for them before this Super Bowl. So interesting record for both teams here.
I mean, even looking at some of the betting stuff that you can get into. So I just found on Bet Online, over 1.5 roughing the passers plus 300.
Ooh,
That's got to be something
wow.
that you would put some money on. I mean,
Yeah,
we're given there will be a roughing the passer call, and I think there will be one in both halves. That's not that egregious to say, but then even looking more into some of the stuff they offer, they're putting a line at 10.5 accepted penalties on the game at the over at plus 100. I could see this, and you said they had some of the most penalties flags thrown as a group. Is that an accurate depiction?
Yes. So he tallied the 4th most flags per games in 18 games this season. However, in Super Bowl 56, his last Super Bowl, he only called 7 penalties. So it's an interesting line. That's a pretty sharp line for flags. I was actually going to say under, because 10.5 is a lot for a game. But they were 4th most this year, which is the most recent data. That Super Bowl that he did was 3 years ago. And they are tied for 3rd most accepted penalties. So is that accepted penalties or total?
Yeah,
ball?
just accepted.
Oh, accepted. That's interesting.
Yep.
I see as high as
That's
much
quite a
as
bit
it
still.
seems like this game would be rigged. That actually seems pretty high for me. 10 accepted. Like if it was total called, maybe, but there's a lot of them ones that are accepted, like DPIs when the catch is caught.
Yeah.
I think like stuff like that.
I mean, I think you have the script for the game here. The team penalized for the first roughing the passer call, Philadelphia Eagles at minus 160, and the team to have the most personal foul penalties called, Eagles minus 130. Most roughing the passer penalties called against them, Eagles minus 175. I mean, the script's already in that something's going to go down here.
Are you telling me that we don't have a reffing problem in the NFL when one team is minus 160 to get the first roughing the passer call before the game starts?
That is crazy.
Like you can tell me all you want about data about like the aggressiveness of the linebackers or whatever, but when you have one team minus 1, it's not like minus 120. You have minus 160 on a team to get a roughing the passer call before the game even starts. Yeah. And you're telling me we don't have a reffing problem?
This is all very like it's very like interesting to me now, because like before I knew like all of this, I was thinking with all of the shit that's been going on with the refs this past week, that for this Super Bowl that they're going to let them play, because I just can't see this being a game where it's like a flag happy game, because I just think just the average NFL fan is going to go absolutely nuts, and then actually like especially if it's for the Chiefs. So with how much this actually past week, like actually we've like talked about like how much has been shown of like this, to me it just feels like they're gonna let them play, and it's not going to be as, I guess, one-sided as actually most people think it is. That's just how I would think. I obviously don't like know that that's actually gonna happen.
Yeah.
There's got to be a 30 for 30 that comes out like 5 years down the road about just what has happened in the past 2 seasons, let's say, because it's got just insane about what all you can kind of say from a reffing perspective about what's going on. I mean, I hope that nothing's called also, but you see it time after time after time. I mean, data shows that something's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. From what we've seen the last few years, or they could take the completely opposite approach and they actually rigged this game for the Eagles reffing wise, because then they can be like, guys, remember in that Super Bowl in 2025 when Mahomes got all these bad calls? Like, he's going to build up at least 5 years of good calls now for at least the next 5 years, because they'll just keep saying, remember in the Super Bowl when, everything was going the Eagles' way? So maybe they're using this as like the game that they're like, all right, we're just going to set up the Chiefs for the next 5 years or so. We're just going to call the game for the Eagles, let them win a Super Bowl. And then we can just build up some credit. They're going to build up some credit in this game for rigged calls in the future.
I mean, these are two teams that have like the most voodoo. Like I just say, like Eagles voodoo. They always have these because they get the same penalties sometimes, and you don't see it as much. But these random defensive pass interference calls that go in favor of them down the field. I just say like it's Chiefs voodoo, it's Eagles voodoo, and now you have two teams that I think get the most calls for them in the league. But the Eagles should win this game. I'm scared to bet them because you have to take into account some of the times when, let's say that the Chiefs are down 3 and we saw the same thing when the Chiefs played the Bengals earlier this year on that bullshit 4th down defensive pass interference call against the Bengals, which they ended up losing the game because, I mean, you could call it's close, but the amount of times that they get the penalty and other teams don't is just impeccable.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up the Eagles also getting some of those favorable calls, because the one that initially comes to my mind, and a pretty big one, was the one that A.J. Brown, after he got that touchdown catch in the game against the Commanders, and he stared down. I'm completely blanking on the defender's name right now, but he got in his face. He pretty much went helmet to helmet with him and was yelling in his face and he didn't get a flag. And then, of course, his teammate comes to his side and kind of shoves A.J. Brown off him, like, what are you doing? And then he gets an unnecessary roughness penalty. It's like, how are you not going to give a taunting? Like, that's the definition. We've seen taunting for a look. Like, you get taunting.
Someone got a point a few weeks ago,
looking at the defender. Yeah.
There was one on the sideline where a tight end or someone caught it and he just points, and I can't remember what it was, but even last week, I think happened when, how many times is Travis Kelce going to do that? Where little pussy boy goes up, says some things, and then just runs away after the fact, and then just like face falls down and flops.
Yeah, he did the same thing. That was actually almost the same one as A.J. Brown, because he did the same thing where he shoved the defender off. It was the same play, actually, I think. Almost the exact same thing. Yeah. And the added part of that you just brought up was he starts to act like he's walking away, and then he, flops a little bit. And of course, the ref sees that, and that's actually less atypical. The second guy's always going to get the flag, it seems like, in the NFL. So I don't think that's Chiefs related, but the fact just Travis Kelce's the player doing that and knowing like he was completely trying to draw a flag.
Is that not reviewable though? Like even if you're in the NBA or college basketball, they'll at least look at it for like a flagrant one. When something happens, they'll look at it and they'll bring back like a technical foul or a flagrant. Is that not something in the NFL that they can look at? Well,
it should be. And you brought up a good point. There's no flopping penalty in the NFL. There is in pretty much every other sport. College basketball has flopping. There's flopping penalties in basketball.
They used to get fined for it in the NBA.
Well, in the NHL, you actually get a penalty against your team for flopping. So like if you get it happens all the time in the NHL. Even if it was a correct call and it was supposed to be a penalty, they'll call the penalty on the other team. But then if you flop and embellish it, it's actually called embellishment. Then they'll cancel it out and it'll be 4-on-4 instead of a power play, because they're like, all right, you didn't need to do all that after getting like the penalty. So they'll actually call embellishment and make it a 4-on-4, even if you like over exaggerate it. And then same thing for basketball. But in the NFL, there's nothing for it. You can.
It should be that way, because I will say, like, backing the refs on that point, it is hard to make a call when everyone's flopping. Like you see it all the time, and when you go in slow motion, you're like, "Oh Jesus, that was a shitty call." But I mean, for 40-year-olds to be flopping, you look at it, LeBron's always done it too. Or, other players. There's just historical players that are always
Embiid.
flopping. Yeah, Embiid. Like,
Joel Embiid, yeah.
it's just so annoying to see 40-year-olds that it's not like competitive spirit. Like, win the game. You don't have to act like a fucking baby.
No, and the players that do it are usually the ones that are legendary enough to already not need to flop to be a dominant player. And you take away LeBron or Embiid's flopping, they're still some of the best players in the NBA.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's shitty to see them think they have to do that to get these extra calls. And usually they do. So to their credit, it usually works, especially if you're a good player, because they're going to be like, oh, like, this guy definitely got fouled because he's a good player. But it just sucks to see as a fan, because it kind of taints your legacy when it's like you're known for part of that. Like, sure, he's going to be the best NBA player of all time, or arguably second best, but it just kind of puts a little bit of a stain on it when it's like, okay, yeah, but he was also a huge flopper.
I mean, everyone said that last year with Zach Edey. How many foul calls Zach Edey was getting?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to be fair, he was like 8'7".
Yeah, I don't know how you
playing with college
him.
kids, but
All right, guys. Well, let's wrap it up as far as with the Super Bowl here again, and let's just go around and I actually just want to ask this: do you think that this year's Super Bowl will this game be decided by actually the actual refs? Like actually, will there be a game-changing call?
I'm going to say yes. You look at it historically in every game that the Chiefs play in, and probably that the Eagles play in. I don't watch them. I don't watch them enough to say it, but I will say that there will be at least one turning point call that shifts the momentum from one side to the other. And I think in the last, we'll probably come on next week and talk about the Super Bowl more in depth, but I'm going to say that there's a call that will ruin the game for one team in favor of the other. I'm going to say yes.
I'm actually going to say no. I actually think that, I believe it was Spencer who made a good point that, or I think it was actually JD, that you're getting to the point now where I don't know how much the NFL can afford to have another game. It's all everyone's talking about. The Super Bowl this year feels super anticlimactic, unless you're a Chiefs or Eagles fan. Like, the whole nation, when the Eagles won and then the Chiefs won, it was like, oh, great, here we go again. And, they're great teams, but it's just not a super fun Super Bowl for anyone except the fans of those two teams. And I think everyone can agree on that, just based off what we've seen across social media the last 2 weeks, and talking with people. Like, no one in my family's talking about it. I'm at my other job and no one's talking about it there. It just feels so anticlimactic. And I believe a part of that is just because of how much these two teams have been seemingly favored in the NFL so much. I think it's gotten to a point where I don't think the NFL can afford a Super Bowl where a call like that happens. It's going to just completely even add on top. It's going to add the cherry on top to what has already been talked about so much the last few years with the Chiefs, and even to what we brought up, the Eagles as well. They've gotten a lot of favorable calls. So I'm going to say no. I'm going to say that they try and actually ref the fairest game possible, and potentially, like I said earlier, build up some credit for future years if they happen to give a favorable call towards the Eagles.
Yeah, I am actually going to be on the same page there, Ben. I actually think no. I think, just with the past week, with how much has been said and put on the refs, I just don't think that can be a thing. And also, I will say, if there is just a bad call, if there is one of those, I think there will be another one on the other side.
Yeah.
That's not saying that that's still a good thing. But I actually do think that this will be refed as fairly as actually can be, though.
I agree.